Have you ever noticed how the people who desperately want attention are usually the ones who receive the least respect? They talk too much, explain too much, try too hard, laugh too loudly, and constantly seek approval from everyone around them. Yet despite all their effort, people rarely remember them deeply. But then there are others, quiet individuals who walk into a room without forcing anything. They are calm, composed, difficult to read, and somehow, without begging for attention, they naturally attract it. People notice when they speak. People remember their presence long after they leave. And the strange part is, they are not even trying. This is one of the greatest psychological truths the Stoics understood centuries ago. Human beings are naturally drawn toward emotional strength, self-control, and inner stability. We admire people who seem complete within themselves because deep down, most people are fighting chaos inside their own minds. And when someone appears calm in a world full of noise, they immediately stand out. But most people never learn this lesson. Instead of building inner value, they chase external validation. They try to impress everyone. They constantly explain themselves. They fear silence. They fear being misunderstood. They fear being forgotten. And because of that fear, they slowly lose the very thing they are trying to gain: respect. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That single sentence contains more psychological wisdom than most people realize. Because the moment your happiness depends on other people constantly noticing you, approving you, praising you, or validating you, you surrender your power. The Stoic path teaches the opposite. It teaches emotional independence. It teaches presence without desperation. It teaches value without performance. And that is exactly why some individuals naturally become magnetic. Not because they manipulate people, but because they stop chasing. Sometimes silence protects your peace better than explanation ever could. Think about how much emotional energy people waste trying to explain themselves to individuals determined to misunderstand them anyway. They write long messages, over-defend their intentions, replay conversations in their minds for hours, and slowly destroy their own peace, trying to control other people's perceptions. The Stoics considered this emotional slavery. Because the moment your peace depends on being perfectly understood by everyone around you, you give strangers control over your mind. But emotional discipline changes everything. When you stop chasing validation, people begin noticing your presence differently. When you stop explaining every detail, your words gain weight. When you become less reactive, your calmness becomes memorable. And when people realize that your attention is not easily gained, they begin valuing it more. This is not manipulation. It is human psychology. People naturally appreciate what feels rare, emotionally grounded, and difficult to replace. But here is where many people make a dangerous mistake. They hear ideas like mystery and silence, then become emotionally unavailable, cold, arrogant, or detached from everyone. That is not Stoicism. Stoicism is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming emotionally intelligent. There is a difference. The Stoic still cares deeply. The Stoic still loves, connects, helps, and listens. But they do not lose themselves emotionally trying to gain approval from others. They remain centered within themselves. And that inner stability creates an almost magnetic effect. Because most people today are emotionally chaotic. They are addicted to stimulation, validation, drama, and attention. So when someone appears calm, grounded, and internally secure, it feels rare, almost refreshing. When people know every thought in your mind, every insecurity in your heart, every plan before it happens, and every emotion the moment you feel it, there is nothing left to discover. No tension, no curiosity, no depth. And human beings are naturally fascinated by depth. Think about someone you deeply admired in your life. Maybe a teacher, a mentor, an older sibling, or even someone you loved. Chances are, part of their impact came from the fact that they were not completely predictable. There was depth to them, layers to discover, a calmness you could not fully explain. This is why the Stoics valued restraint. Not suppression, but restraint. There is a huge difference between the two. Suppression means hiding emotions out of fear. Restraint means mastering emotions through wisdom. The Stoic does not reveal everything immediately because they understand timing. They understand that words lose power when used carelessly. Imagine a king constantly talking to everyone all day about every thought in his mind. Over time, his words would lose significance. But when someone speaks less and chooses their words carefully, people listen more closely. Scarcity creates value, even in conversation. This is why strategic pauses feel powerful. This is why calm individuals often dominate rooms filled with louder people. This is why someone who speaks with intention appears wiser than someone who speaks endlessly. And sadly, most people never learn this. They think confidence means constant expression, but true confidence often appears as calmness. A truly secure person does not feel the need to constantly prove themselves. They do not chase every argument. They do not defend themselves against every opinion. They do not panic when misunderstood temporarily. Because they understand something, emotionally mature people eventually realize, not everyone needs to understand you immediately. In today's world, attention has become cheap. Everyone is posting, talking, reacting, exposing, arguing, seeking likes, and demanding recognition every second. Social media has turned many people into performers constantly screaming, "Please notice me." But ironically, the more someone begs for attention, the less valuable they appear psychologically. Think about luxury brands for a moment. Truly valuable things rarely scream for attention. They do not beg people to choose them. Their value speaks quietly. And human psychology works similarly. People instinctively respect those who respect themselves first. This is why the Stoics placed enormous importance on self-control. Epictetus believed that a person who cannot control their emotions becomes controlled by the world around them. And if you observe carefully, you will notice how true this is. One negative comment ruins someone's entire day. One rejection destroys their confidence. One ignored message creates anxiety. One moment of criticism makes them question their worth. Why? Because their emotional state depends entirely on external reactions. But the Stoic becomes dangerous in a different way. Not dangerous through aggression, manipulation, or dominance, but through calmness, through inner certainty, through emotional discipline. Imagine two men being insulted publicly. The first instantly reacts with anger. He raises his voice, argues emotionally, and desperately tries to defend his ego. The second listens calmly. He pauses. He smiles slightly and responds with complete control. Which one appears more powerful? Almost always, the calm one. Because emotional control signals inner strength. And human beings instinctively admire strength. This is one of the deepest reasons mystery becomes so powerful psychologically. Most people reveal too much too quickly because they fear losing connection. They think constant availability creates closeness. But often, it creates familiarity without respect. But silence itself is misunderstood by most people. Many assume silence is weakness. They think the quiet person has nothing to say. They mistake calmness for insecurity because modern culture has conditioned people to associate loudness with confidence. Yet if you observe life carefully, you will notice something fascinating. Truly powerful people rarely rush to prove their power. They do not panic in conversations. They do not desperately fight for attention in every room. They do not interrupt constantly to establish dominance. Their presence alone often speaks before they even open their mouths. And this is where silence becomes psychological strength rather than absence. The Stoics understood that silence reveals emotional discipline. Anyone can react instantly. Anyone can explode emotionally, defend themselves impulsively, or speak without thinking. But remaining composed when emotions rise requires tremendous self-mastery. And deep down, people recognize this instinctively. When someone remains calm under pressure, it creates a strange psychological effect. Others begin projecting strength onto them because composure during emotional moments feels rare. Especially today. Look at the modern world carefully. Most people cannot tolerate silence anymore. The moment there is emptiness, they rush to fill it. They grab their phones during quiet moments. They speak unnecessarily to avoid awkwardness. They constantly seek stimulation because silence forces them to confront themselves. And for many people, that confrontation feels uncomfortable. Because silence exposes insecurity, anxiety, loneliness, and emotional dependence that distractions normally hide. But the Stoic trains himself differently. Instead of escaping silence, he learns from it. He becomes comfortable sitting alone with his own thoughts that he no longer needs constant noise to feel alive. And this changes a person completely. Think about conversations in modern life. Most people barely listen anymore. They wait for their turn to speak. They interrupt constantly. They seek attention rather than understanding. But when someone genuinely listens with calmness and presence, people instantly feel the difference emotionally. Why? Because being fully heard has become rare, and rarity creates emotional impact. This is why many quiet individuals unknowingly leave stronger impressions than louder ones. Their energy feels different, more grounded, more intentional, more peaceful. And deep down, people crave that emotional stability because so few possess it. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Despite ruling one of the largest empires in history, he constantly reminded himself not to become controlled by ego, praise, or public opinion. Imagine that level of discipline. A man with enormous power, still focusing on mastering himself instead of controlling others. That is true Stoic strength. And this strength changes how people perceive you in everyday life too. In friendships, relationships, workplaces, classrooms, and conversations, emotional control quietly elevates your presence. People begin seeing you as someone stable, someone trustworthy, someone difficult to shake emotionally. And whether they consciously realize it or not, they begin respecting you more because of it. But this is only the beginning, because once you learn how to cultivate calmness and mystery, the next challenge becomes even more powerful, learning how to control the energy of silence itself. And very few people understand how psychologically powerful silence can truly become. This is why emotionally disciplined people often appear more focused and purposeful. Their minds are not constantly exhausted by external validation. Their attention remains directed inward rather than scattered across endless opinions. And over time, this inner discipline creates something powerful: presence. Presence cannot be faked. It is felt. Some individuals walk into rooms and instantly change the emotional atmosphere without speaking much at all. Why? Because people subconsciously detect nervous energy, desperation, insecurity, calmness, and confidence through behavior far more than words. A calm nervous system communicates safety. Emotional groundedness communicates strength. Stillness communicates control. This is why the Stoics trained themselves to observe rather than react impulsively. Observation sharpens perception. Reactive people rarely see clearly because emotions cloud their judgment instantly. But calm individuals notice details others miss. They hear what people actually mean beneath words. They recognize manipulation faster. They make decisions more carefully. And eventually, this awareness gives them a major advantage in life. Most people live reactively while the Stoic lives intentionally. And that single difference changes relationships, careers, friendships, leadership, and even personal peace. Because when you become emotionally intentional, you stop allowing temporary emotions to control permanent decisions. You stop speaking from wounded pride. You stop ruining peace just to protect ego. That single idea reflects one of the deepest Stoic principles ever practiced. Your strength is not measured by whether life hurts you. Your strength is measured by how consciously you respond when it does. And people feel this energy around emotionally disciplined individuals. Have you ever met someone who barely speaks, yet everyone listens when they finally do? Someone who remains composed while others panic? Someone who never desperately seeks approval, yet naturally earns respect? Their power usually does not come from appearance, money, or status alone. It comes from emotional stability. Their nervous system feels calm. Their reactions feel intentional. Their presence feels grounded. And in a chaotic world, grounded people become unforgettable. This is also why mystery remains psychologically attractive. Not because mystery is manipulation, but because emotional self-containment creates curiosity naturally. Most people reveal everything immediately because they crave instant connection. But instant exposure often removes emotional depth. The human mind becomes fascinated by what unfolds slowly. Think about books, movies, or even people who left strong emotional impressions on you. The most memorable experiences rarely revealed everything at once. There was tension, discovery, depth, and layers unfolding gradually over time. Human psychology enjoys mystery because mystery keeps attention alive. And yet modern culture encourages the complete opposite. People overshare every emotion instantly online. Every frustration becomes a public performance. Every thought becomes content. Every private struggle becomes externalized for validation. And slowly, people lose connection with themselves because they become addicted to audience reactions. Their emotions stop belonging to them internally. Everything becomes performative. The other remains calm, pauses before speaking, and refuses to emotionally collapse into chaos. Suddenly, the emotional balance of the entire interaction changes. The calmer individual begins appearing more grounded, more intelligent, and more powerful even if they say fewer words. Why? Because emotional reactions reveal internal instability while calmness suggests inner control. And the human mind deeply trusts control. This is why strategic silence often speaks louder than endless explanation. Sometimes refusing to react immediately creates more impact than defending yourself emotionally for hours. Sometimes walking away peacefully demonstrates more strength than winning an argument. Sometimes silence communicates self-respect more clearly than words ever could. But again, this does not mean becoming cold or emotionally disconnected. Many people misunderstand stoicism and turn themselves into emotionally numb individuals who suppress vulnerability entirely. That is not wisdom. In fact, emotional numbness is often unresolved pain disguised as strength. True stoicism is not emotional death. It is emotional mastery. The Stoic still feels anger, sadness, disappointment, love, fear, and attachment. The difference is that they are not controlled by those emotions. They observe emotions without becoming enslaved by them, like a man standing beside a river instead of drowning inside it. This distinction changes everything because most people become whatever they feel in the moment. If they feel angry, they become anger. If they feel rejected, they become insecurity. If they feel criticized, they become defensive. Their emotions control their behavior instantly. But the Stoic creates space between feeling and reaction. And inside that space exists power. Viktor Frankl once wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." The Stoics would have seen this as a dangerous loss of inner freedom because the more your identity depends on external applause, the more fragile your emotional world becomes. One moment of criticism can suddenly feel catastrophic. One lack of attention can create anxiety. One ignored post can damage self-worth. And this emotional dependence silently drains peace from millions of people every single day. But the Stoic path leads somewhere entirely different. It teaches you to build a life so internally stable that praise no longer intoxicates you and criticism no longer destroys you. Imagine the freedom in that. Imagine waking up without needing strangers to validate your existence before you feel worthy. Imagine being able to sit quietly without anxiety consuming you. Imagine becoming so emotionally grounded that temporary rejection no longer shakes your identity. That is real confidence, not arrogance, not loudness, not dominance, not attention-seeking behavior. Real confidence is emotional steadiness. It is the ability to remain yourself regardless of external noise. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. Despite having enormous influence and power, he repeatedly reminded himself how temporary public opinion truly was. He understood something most people spend their entire lives forgetting. People's opinions change constantly. Today they praise you. Tomorrow they criticize you. One moment they admire you. The next they misunderstand you. If your peace depends on controlling their perceptions, your peace will never last. And this realization becomes deeply liberating because once you stop trying to control everyone's thoughts about you, you recover enormous emotional energy. Energy that was previously wasted overthinking conversations, replaying mistakes, seeking approval, and fearing judgment suddenly becomes available for growth, discipline, creativity, and peace. Because someone who is comfortable alone becomes emotionally dangerous in the most powerful way possible. They cannot easily be manipulated by fear of abandonment, rejection, or loneliness. Think about how many people stay trapped in toxic friendships, unhealthy relationships, and disrespectful environments simply because they fear being alone. They tolerate mistreatment because silence scares them more than chaos. So they cling desperately to attention, even when that attention destroys their peace. But the Stoic understands something life eventually teaches every mature person. Peace is more valuable than temporary validation. And once you truly understand this emotionally, your entire energy changes. You stop chasing people who constantly disrespect you. You stop begging for understanding from those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop forcing connections that clearly lack depth. Instead, you become more selective with your energy, your words, and your emotional investment. And ironically, this restraint often makes people value your presence more. Because human beings unconsciously respect boundaries, even if they do not admit it openly. Notice how people often take endlessly available individuals for granted. The person who is always texting first, always explaining, always apologizing unnecessarily, always trying to maintain connection at any cost usually becomes emotionally undervalued over time. Not because they are worthless, but because desperation unconsciously reduces perceived value. Meanwhile, individuals who remain emotionally balanced, calm, and secure within themselves naturally create a sense of importance around their presence. This is why silence can completely shift social dynamics.